building.
This one?
Yep.
Good point.
So, all right. It is 6 o'clock, so we'll call our working session to order. Just a note for those who are new, working sessions are our chance to discuss things that are on the agenda here tonight. We won't be taking any motions or acting on anything. It's only discussion. And then if we want to take action, it'll be on our next council agenda or some meeting in the future. So, with that, Ron wants to talk about the mobile home park first. So, Ron, Chuck, flip a coin, whoever wants to talk tonight.
I guess I'll be the winner.
Okay.
I don't know if Gene and Megan are fully aware of the background of the trailer court, but last spring, summer, the owner of Spanier Welding actually came forward to us and indicated that he was interested in purchasing part of the trailer court for future expansion. His timeline, he said at that time, was probably in that 3-year period, which actually works out very good with the grant. Bolton and Meng did some investigation that yes, this would likely qualify for the deed grant. The first deadline was in September. Obviously, we were not in a position to apply at that time. So luckily, we're going to have a whole year to plan. I think it's in July. We have to have it complete or close to be submitted in September again. We did initially look at 4 different sites, the west, the northwest, the northeast, and the site we've pretty much come down to is right behind John Deere. We did hand out some preliminary cost estimates, which Bolton and Mink did. The phase 1 would be roughly that $800,000. Phase 2 for them at that site would be right around that $500,000. The only other option we looked at closely was phase 1. The northwest option would be at almost or 1.2 million, you could say, with an additional roughly 450,000 for phase 2 out there. The last meeting we just had with the owner, Brent Badger, I guess we'll just go through some of the questions that we discussed with him. Has the relocation been discussed with his residents at the park? And the answer to that is yes. He talked to a number of them, and his on-site manager did talk to quite a number of them. And he indicated, and correct me if I'm wrong, Trigger, I think he said about half, maybe a little bit more, said they would move into the new park, and the ones that wouldn't indicated, well, they'll find someplace else to go.
He said only a couple said that they would move.
Yes. Okay, yep. The biggest concern yet, though, is how are we going to help or assist, because most of these residents will not be able to afford the cost of a new mobile home or even a good used mobile home, which initially we thought was about $35,000, but he came back and said, no, it's going to be closer to $45,000 for a used unit.
Used?
No, new. He said it was new because he couldn't find the used ones at that price.
Right.
So he ended up looking at new ones for around $45,000.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And the impact fund is, well, Chuck, why don't you explain the impact fund a little bit?
Yeah, just to touch base a little bit, there's a couple different funding programs that we've talked to them about through this process. The first one, as Ron mentioned earlier, was sort of an infrastructure-related program that would help fund some of the improvements associated with redeveloping or developing a new park and possibly some of the land acquisition costs. And that one was called the Manufactured Home Park Redevelopment Program. So that's the one Ron mentioned that we could pursue next summer. The other component of it is try to find something that could actually assist some of the residents in getting into a new home, and that's where the impact fund came in. So we did some preliminary discussions with them. It is a potential project that they would look at and consider funding. Essentially, this could potentially provide some gap funding for residents that can't afford to get into a new unit, or even the rehab or resale of an existing unit. And there's several options. They said the developer could even potentially buy it and with the assistance of the impact fund, and then have the people rent, sort of a rent-to-own type situation. But I know the developer, the park owner would prefer not to have to buy the units, prefer the residents to buy them. So basically where we're at with the impact fund, we had a discussion with Brett, the owner, last Friday. We're in the process of working with the impact fund to pull together some information as far as what they would need to see at the initial meeting with Brett to make it sort of a worthwhile meeting and to determine whether this is something that their program would fit or not. So hopefully this would be a program, because as Ron mentioned, it seems to be the biggest sticking point is trying to figure out a way to make the new units affordable for the residents.
Let me add one more thing. The bottom line of the summary, and correct me, Paul, is that if DEED and other grant programs don't come in a big way, this project's not going to happen.
Yeah, that is correct. We did discuss that with Brent. I don't remember his last name, but he was from San Diego, and he's the owner of the mobile home park right now. He said he's willing to take some sort of loss on it. I'm not quite sure. The numbers have not come in real hard yet, but the main goal on this is that no funds change hands, that there is an equal amount per side where he doesn't have to pay and the city doesn't have to pay either. That's the goal to start with. And also that there's nobody homeless.
Yeah.
So that's the main thing that we talked about.
On the initial cost, the $800,000 for the infrastructure, the DEED grant likely will not cover 100% of that, maybe $500,000 or $600,000. The remainder of it, we did inform Brett of that, and he indicated he would accept the rest as an assessment to his property. So that portion would be covered.
That would be spread over time too, right?
Yes, it could be spread over 7, 8, usually we go 10 years.
Yep.
So does that mean he would continue to be the owner of this mobile home park? Or would we,
No, the city would not.
No, I didn't think we-
No, we don't
Oh.
want to be the owner.
we never did want to be.
And his goal is to remain owner.
Okay, okay.
I guess maybe one difference in that from the one that exists today is the road would be a public road, though.
Okay,
That's the way it's been talked about to this point.
And none of the existing homes meet the criteria for the new one, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so this whole discussion sort of came about multifold. One is that we have Spanier Welding that is wanting to expand, and as of right now, they're sort of landlocked where they're at. So if we were able to open that space up, then they could expand. They don't want all of it, so that it would create some additional room in the industrial park. And then also with the housing study, I believe, somebody correct me if this seems wrong, but I don't think any of the homes out there came back as adequate. Most of them were pretty bad. So if we could find a way to do this so that nobody, at the end of the project, if nobody is without a home, that's the goal, keep everybody housed, but improve the living situation for those folks who are out there.
We did discuss a little bit of the covenants, and he is open to putting covenants on there. I guess if a house is 35, 40 years old, it would not be resold, it would have to be moved off. Discussed a little bit about storage, getting garages out there, and making sure that items get put away so it doesn't look like the existing unit that we have. So he is open to those items. I guess if we look at the map, one of the things I think we discussed right at the end, would we be interested in reshaping? Obviously, we're not platting yet, but taking the entire plat and moving it up closer to County Road 34. And then another thing that also came up after the meeting, if you look on Sunrise Avenue, instead of running that road through, would we want to consider just bringing the cul-de-sac out there so it would not run through? I think it'd be more saleable to those residents if they knew that trailer or mobile home park residents could not go through. Just an idea at this time for discussion.
It'll be cul-de-sac on both sides,
Yes.
yeah.
It's obviously not something we gotta decide today, but just so you're aware that it may come up at some point.
How many,
Our next step on it, obviously, is getting the information on the impact fund. As Art said, if the impact fund is out, I don't foresee this going anywhere.
how many units are at the current one? Or how much room, how many units could be?
There's 26 lots in the existing one, however, there's only, I think, 18
I think 18, yeah.
that are currently being utilized.
Okay,
And in the proposal, I think we've got 25 in phase one, and then there's another 18 in phase two. I guess one of the things also discussed is how do we determine, or how do we find, what is the, how many new residents are we gonna get here? We're gonna try and check with some realtors and see what their demand, what they think the demand would be if you had a very good operated mobile home park. I mean, we know housing is a need, so is that a need also?
Is there a way we could utilize some EDAP funds to help with the housing?
I guess that would probably be up to the EDAP board.
Yeah, I was just, I mean,
Yeah.
because it is an EDAP function, is housing. So that would be my, especially if we need some matching funds or low interest loan or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's, in addition to what Chuck said, the impact fund, there's also the main deed grant, right, for moving the park. That's going to be the big one, I think. And then, Paul, you also mentioned that when we're talking about storage, we could also consider something under a FEMA grant to build some kind of storm shelter and utilize that to help put some kind of storage there as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct. With the ball field is at right now, behind the schools, there are tornado shelters under each side of the grandstand, and if I remember right, that was a grant from FEMA.
It was.
Okay, so if that would be the case, it wouldn't hurt to, okay, basically, the way I'm looking at it is, if we can get the federal government to pay for it, it won't be off of our backs, in the long run. So that's just something to look at.
Well, there are multiple grants that we can look at to help support this project.
I'm not sure on the distance of where it is between the schools, but I know Ron and I talked briefly about that with the safe routes to school coming up, if there might be more kids at this location, or, just to make sure that that's brought into play.
It's 4 blocks to the,
Yeah, okay. Because
Well, we may have to go after the crossing lights like we are on 23, might be something we need to look at too down the road. It's just a crosswalk without much signage. People don't pay any attention to.
yeah, because it won't be far enough for busing, so.
Well, Paul did say the school bus could go in here.
Okay,
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
it would be on the other side of the road, the bus doesn't go.
okay.
but that's why you need a cul-de-sac too, right?
And that would be a reason why we probably want a cul-de-sac, yeah.
One thing I'd like to add, if I could, is that we're putting a lot of time and energy into this. If we could somehow come up with some raw numbers on what the assessed value is of the new proposed area versus the assessed value of the property, that is going to be reconfigured. And hopefully we're not too far apart, but I think we should try to work on some numbers so we don't get a surprise down the road. Because I don't know if anyone likes surprises, but I sure don't.
That 480 to 500 is real close.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
Looks good.
All right. So then turning back up to new business, public data on personal devices. So this is just mostly something that we wanted to put on here since we have 2 new members of the council, and then a refresher for Gene and everyone. Is that, you know, anything, now that we're elected officials, our emails, any text messages with constituents or with each other, those types of things are public data, so they can be requested, and it could be the subject of a data request. So just, you know, be mindful of that when corresponding, that something could come up. I haven't seen it yet. Bill Spooner said it was an issue once for him. But that's why, you know, at our first meeting, I asked for the phone so that I can keep them separate. So I appreciate that. So keep that in mind. Another thing is also the stupid, fickle, and I'm calling it stupid, that's my opinion. It serves a purpose, but the open meeting law. Keep in mind anything communicated to a quorum of the council could be considered a meeting, so be careful with like your emails or text messages. Occasionally, if there's like an emergency situation, somebody from City Hall might send out a group text and just say, this is what's going on. Don't reply to that thread, just take it as informational and be done. When you get like the agenda packets and stuff like that, if you're gonna reply with a question or comment, make sure you're hitting reply, not reply all. Because if you hit reply all, then it's gonna go to everyone. I don't think it would ever be an issue, but just in case, then it's there, so. And we're all just being aware of it. Better to be safe than sorry with that part, so. Any questions about that? Otherwise, that's it from me. Okay. Back to you, Ron.
Oh, thank you. 2 pieces of equipment that are proposed to be purchased this spring. The intake number 2, first of all, the pickup. We have a 2011 F-250. That's the one with the box and the crane on it. That is due for replacement. The Public Works, we did look at it last night. The one issue we are having is one of our local dealers can't or doesn't have access to it at this time. Due to the COVID building them. He said he needs a couple more, probably the first, after the first quarter, they'll be able to get us a price. So I guess we're gonna put it on the table till then and bring it forward. The mower, I guess what we're proposing is a 16-foot Toro mower that did go to the park board. At this time, they did not recommend it. They are going to be doing a very good job of vetting it. Probably a little bit of good constructive criticism thrown at me, which I totally accept. Cost on it is approximately $120,000. It's a huge, well, it's not a huge mower. It's like I said, a 16-foot, 72 horsepower. And I guess anytime we spend that kind of money, yes, I think we deserve to make sure it's the right piece of equipment. So we're going to go back and take another look at it. Can we reduce the amount that we're actually mowing? Right now we're mowing just over, I think it's 100 acres. We take the airport alone, that's 20 acres. The out at the ponds is another 20. You know, we have the Lovitz property, all Heatherwood we're mowing. So, and Airport View's got a number of lots that we're mowing. So But our biggest thing is try to reduce the amount we're mowing, see if we can get by with a smaller unit, or take a look at all the pieces of equipment. Should we maybe just be brush hogging some of these, the stormwater ponds? So I guess that's where that one's at. If you have any questions now, I can answer them, otherwise the park board's they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and questioning it.
My question was going to be if you had to mow everything you're mowing, so you answered that already.
A brush hog on the front of the skid loader, would that be an option instead of pulling behind a tractor or anything?
The only trouble with the skid loader, I believe that would get awful tippy, because, you know, in the stormwater ponds, you're usually at a
Right.
pretty good angle, and that's the last thing we'd want to do is jeopardize safety.
Well-
It's something, yes, we can, we'll definitely look into it.
Because especially on flat ground,
On flat ground, it would work great.
I mean, because the pull behinds, I think this would be a better,
No, the idea of putting in some natural prairie grass or forbs, we'll look at it again.
do we have to, could the airport, is there a grass only gets about so high? Would that be,
Well, that's another thing, we can look into a different seed that wouldn't,
because I know you can't have grass that gets 2 feet high.
no, out there, obviously, simply because varmints or anything jumps out in the plane, obviously, safety's number one out there. Yeah, we'll look into it all.
I have a question for you. Instead of looking at something new like this, would there be any chance, say something like the highway department would have something used, but not beat up? Might reduce the cost and still give you the same effect? That's just a
Right.
suggestion.
We can look into that also, see if they have anything that's, most of the time when they get rid of it, it's beat up, but yeah, we might be able to find a good used one.
Sure, if we just plead our case,
Yeah.
see what they come up with. Let them foot the bill for the new one.
So I think we discussed like the redesign too, that some of the parks are going to be undergoing, and we had kind of talked a little bit about more like native grasses or hardscapes or something that's not going to require as much for mowing. So that's an option.
And in theory, those lots are going to sell soon.
Not unless building costs come down.
Well, we had a pretty good year with them last year, all things considered. So, all right. Economic development priorities.
All right, I just put this in there because I want to get, thoughts going on this process. After Ron and I met with a lot of companies around here, we kept on hearing 2 issues that they're having, which is housing and employment. But obviously, everybody has some other ideas that they'd like to do or implement on economic development, so I just thought this will be the chance for us to see what the priorities are, and then I'll focus on the priorities and keep the other ideas on the back burner. So obviously, we already know that employment and housing are 2 priorities. But what other issues or what other economic development items would be relevant to discuss and try to see if we can do something about it?
Childcare. Yeah. I think especially in late hour childcare, something that can go until 8 o'clock or even later.
At Lewis Industries, they expressed that there's a need for childcare for their second shift.
Huge, yeah.
Other companies have said so as well.
I think that would be a good priority because it wouldn't cut into, undercut the providers that we already have in town because they don't offer those hours. So it wouldn't be, bankrupting any of them.
Otherwise, it's not really an economic development, but maybe looking at sort of facade development for downtown. And I think I looked the other day, and we only have 1 or 2 vacant buildings just right here down the street, but it doesn't look that way. So if there's any sort of facade grants down there or out there that we can apply for and use, just improve the look of the buildings.
Yeah, I'll check that out. That's a good one.
The mayor of Laverne said that there was something he was doing that was really working well there, some kind of facade grant or program I can check into.
Any other comments on that? All right.
Staffing, starting with city admin.
Oh, I had one more thing on.
Yeah.
Yep. A few months back, Paul Bugby was in here with, talking about lodging tax to use to promote vacationing and maybe see how he's doing on that and what it takes to get that going.
I can respond to that.
Okay.
So at that meeting, you'll recall, it would not be worthy for us to do it without the township's participation. So we left it with the understanding that we would go in on that once the township approved it. I have not gotten their ordinance yet.
Okay.
So I am waiting on the township approval and their ordinance to bring our ordinance forward. So I did reach out to Matt Dickhausen because he asked me maybe 30 days ago or 45 days ago, he asked me where we were with it, and I said we are still waiting for the township. And you know, he asked me why we were waiting for the township, and I told him that it would not be advantageous for us to apply to our smaller entity versus their larger entity. So I believe they were supposed to take action on it, but I have not gotten the township's ordinance.
Because it sounded like Bugby was in favor of it.
Yes, they were. He actually came and
So-
presented that night.
He maybe needs to crank up his township.
But I still have the folder that says lodging tax open in my drawer, and I've gotten nowhere with the township to this point.
Okay.
It's too bad.
Okay, anything else on EJAP? All right, clerical assistant position.
So Jen and I brought up at a department head meeting that was, an ongoing concern was that the admin staff, the shortages up there. And he had tasked us with coming up with a job description that he thought would fit the front. And I believe the job description we have come up with would probably be a full-time position. I can't imagine that that would be a part-time position. What we did is we took the job descriptions of everybody up in the front office now, and Stephanie's admin position that she held, took away the police and just did the admin, and kind of rearranged a few things, and had this be kind of a clerical assistant that they would do all the scanning, the mailings, the filing, letters potentially to people. One of the bigger jobs would be processing water billing.
Yep.
It seems to be, what I'm finding is payroll and accounts payable seem to go really well with accounts receivable and journal entries and month end, more so than water billing, that might be better on its own with a different person. Administering the pet tracker program, that is something that gets put on the back burner every single year because nobody has time to mess with it. And, I think we went, Jen, correct my numbers if I'm wrong, but I think at some point we had like 300 pets registered, licensed in town, and we're 100 maybe now. And it's just because we can't keep up on it. And it's a simple little thing, but it is $15 a pet. And it also keeps people's animals vaccinated like they're supposed to be. Making reservations for travel and accommodations, processing different licenses, being able to help with, potentially doing simple building permit apps, your water bill change outs. So that's kind of what we came up with, and would just like to be able to start that process. I did go in and I took the spreadsheet that we use to put the salaries in the budget and took Stephanie's position out and put a new person, potential new person in as a grade 3, step 1, based on some of the other girls in the office. That's just where I thought was maybe where it would point at with what's on that job description. Put that in, did some rearranging of salaries, and the biggest change I made was the administrator's salary. A good portion of it was coming out of the general fund, but based on the job description, I believe it should be about 50% EDAP. So in changing that, and of course EDAP is its own fund, it actually lowered general, water, sewer, and I believe it lowered liquor just a hair, and of course it
Very small.
increased.
No, the liquor was very small.
Yeah, it was just a tiny decrease, I believe. And then it increased EDAP, of course, but if that's what Tarek is doing, that makes sense to be there. It still left about a $50,000 in their wiggle room for Paul to look at a potential clerical in the back as well. So it did arrange that quite nicely. However, with that being said, my disclaimer is, this past budget for the 2021 budget, in the past, the history of it is, whatever the expenses are budgeted for in EDAP, a transfer is done from the general fund to EDAP to cover those expenses. The last few years, we have taken part of that expense and covered it, per se, with the Heatherwood sales. But those will at some point end as well. This year, trying to balance the budget and make those numbers a little better, we did not do a transfer from the general fund to EDAP because EDAP has got a very healthy balance. But if we start taking out a lot more salary and we don't transfer over, that's gonna drop pretty. So just, this is going to policies and procedures tomorrow night as well. So just up for discussion, I guess. Anyone's input would be great.
Is there a lot of overtime being put in right now?
Right now, the 3 girls that work more in motor vehicle, because I include Kristen in that, even though she's social media, she spends probably 90% of her day in motor vehicle. They are getting their overtime under control. There's still probably an hour a week for each of them. Usually if they put in overtime, they try to bug out early one day toward the end of the week. Doesn't always happen. Jen and I are still giving quite a bit of overtime because we're covering Stephanie's position yet until we get somebody hired.
So if we hire this clerical assistant, is that gonna help put a stop to overtime?
That would be the goal.
That's the goal.
Absolutely.
Because that's, actually, I'd kind of like a monthly report, like Paul gives us across the board for every department, who, what, and why.
For overtime?
That's what I'd like. I don't know if that's something we need to discuss at a council meeting or how anybody else feels.
Maybe not a who, but just a total amount might be helpful.
Huh?
Or the department.
Yeah, maybe a department or just the total amount. I worry about the who, just with data practices stuff.
Well, on Paul's, we're got the officer number, which ain't real hard to figure out.
No, it's not, so that's why I'm not saying it definitively, that's just the concern that pops into my mind.
I don't know.
I guess my question is, we kicked this can down the road before saying, let's wait until we get a new city admin on. We have that, we still think it's necessary. There's a voice inside my head that just can't help but wonder, can some of this sort of be reshuffled around once Tarek's more settled in? And if it can, should we look at sort of a temp position for this for 6 months or so? And if we say, no, you know what, this is full-time, hire that person on full-time, and if not, we shuffle it out because it's just temp, so then we're not adding something in, we're not adding a union position that's hard to get rid of later.
I somewhat agree, and that's where Terry has to help us out on this. At the end of the day, it may be cheaper to pay 10 hours of overtime than a new employee with benefits.
You'll burn out your
Or
employees.
you're part-time, you aren't paying benefits.
Yeah, no, I see the benefit of going temporary, I mean, and that will be a way to try the person, see how they fit into the role, and see how the job description, morphs into what we need it to be. I mean, that's not a bad idea. But it would take a workload off, the rest of the staff here and, help keep their overtime in check.
Yeah, I think something needs to be done right away. I'm inclined to think if we can start with it as a temp position, and then maybe bring that person on permanently.
A temp position would not work in motor vehicle. However, with that being said, this job description we created is not motor vehicle.
Yeah.
I was gonna
correct.
say, we've tried temps before, and it takes so darn long for them to learn the job that,
We had a really good success with one temp though, and I don't want to name names, but we do have one full-time here that started as a temp and has been a fabulous asset to the city.
And I did, when I saw this, I called Len to see if something like that was even possible, and he thought that it probably was, given the timing of it right now. If we were doing a 6-month stint, by the time this got pointed out and hired, he thought maybe some of the people who work as paras at the school who are unemployed because of remote learning could step into this role and then would be phasing out of it, assuming that it stayed temporary, right around the time school started again. That would give them some money, so he thought we could probably find some good candidates if we temped it out.
Okay.
One thing to keep in mind too with the temp is, after their certain amount of time is up, there's usually a buyout at the end. If you hire them full-time, that you're gonna have to pay something up to the agency for finding you the employee.
Just think that with either of these positions, there's so much information, city information and private information that person is going to be privy to, that I would feel hesitant to, have temps like moved in and out or whatever, just make sure that I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's just, there's a ton of city information that these people are going to get, so I don't know if, temp's one thing, just as long as it's, a consistent person that's there and not,
So you're not rotating with people coming in.
Yes.
Yeah, I understand.
How would it be to classify this as something like a 1 or 2 year position? Would that be possible?
I don't know what the limitations are on temp workers before you have to make a decision. It could be 2 years, I'm not sure.
Sure. Okay.
Well, I think, and then we get to our POL, and if that's gonna ever get in check, we gotta have enough help, or that's never gonna come down to 325 neither.
What I'm hearing tonight is that we're all in favor of getting somebody in there sooner rather than later. And in what capacity, I think policies can probably spend some time on that tomorrow night and make a recommendation to the council.
for the city clerk one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on the city clerk position? Okay. Looking at the police secretary.
So we're kind of in the same situation that City Hall is with Steph leaving. We're obviously down our secretary. Pretty much what we did is we went through and we removed all of the administrative tasks out of Stephanie's job position. Went through, reworked and looked at exactly the tasks that would be needed. Reached out to a couple other agencies, looked at the things that they had in theirs for their support staff, included a couple of additional things. Nothing real major changed, but certainly the police department, especially with our new RMS systems and the transcription and all the data requests and stuff like that that we get, it's a necessary position. Right now, vast majority of those responsibilities fall on myself, which I know the council has asked, you know, and wants me out in the community more. But unfortunately, between records requests, video requests, and all these other things, having to do all that stuff, which is something that would fall to this person, takes me off the street, and doesn't give me the opportunity to do that.
Are you looking at full-time for this? Or
I think the positions is enough for it. When Stephanie started for, you know, and yes, some of it was, you know, catch up when she first started. But she was able to stay busy pretty much for the first 6 months or more. And then shortly after she started to roll over into some of the administrative stuff, that's when we saw a change in the administrator. And then everything shifted the other direction. And it went straight to, you know, pretty much 80 to 90% of her time was straight admin stuff. So, you know, I believe there's more than enough work in the PD for a full-time secretary. You know, most agencies our size in this area are running at, you know, pretty much a full-time position, so.
I would assume that once body cams are up and running, that would be another task that they would be required to do?
Yeah, so with our new system, you know, we'll have the ability to send, you know, send videos. The one thing that we're gonna have is the redaction of those videos. So that's either gonna fall on that person or myself.
Okay.
You know, to sit here and do all that redaction, which is gonna be there. So yeah, we're gonna see some additional time there, but
Okay.
right now, all the videos currently go from the flash drives in the squad cars onto a external hard drive on my computer, and I'm the only one with access to it. With the new system, it'll be computer-based or web-based, so everybody will have access to it. Only certain people will have access to do the things that need to be done, and that would be probably the main point person for that.
Okay.
Where is this within your budget? I know Stephanie was only part-time, technically. So is the budget there for a full-time person?
I've always said no. According to Belinda, with what she's done, as far as the reworking, I would say we're probably close.
But you're still looking at the transfer to EDAP. You know, that's normally about a $36,000 transfer. So if you guys do that again, that really wipes out the extra 50,000.
It'll work in the budget, but it starts dwindling the EDAP fund.
So I understood the 50,000 would be to support the clerical assistant person.
well, that was for,
No, if I am correct in my thought process that a new clerical person would come in at a grade 3, step 1, I've got that in this budget.
That's in the budget already.
It's already in there. So then the remaining, I think it was actually about 47,000 left over in the general fund. I just want to be super clear that EDAP transfer still, at some point, is going to have to come back into the general fund.
So right now, it's not budgeted for, it's just, we have some wiggle room this year because we didn't make that EDAP transfer. Budgeting wise, would it make sense to bring this person on at 3/4 time?
You know, we've gone back and forth for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years on exactly, and Gene, you'd have to help. I don't remember when exactly, is that like 14, 15, somewhere in there?
quite a while, when we
So-
started with a part-time.
Yeah, we've gone back and forth. the question would be, can we find somebody at a 3/4 time position to
That's
come
what I
in?
was-
And that's,
That would be
you know, when we created Steph's position a few years back, that's why we created it the way we did, was to be able to maintain somebody that would stay. I will tell you, having gone through
3?
3 now in a hybrid, it's not working as a hybrid. So, you know, we need to separate those two positions out and keep them, you know, there. Whether or not we can get people, that I don't know. I would like to believe we can, but, you know, if we started that way, we could see how it worked, and see what we get.
Would this also be step 1, grade 3?
I would doubt that. I believe that Stephanie started at a grade 5.
Grade 5?
I think so. I don't think I have that in here, but I might in here. Let me look.
And I'm not sure without sending it up to, Ann and getting it pointed to know exactly where it would be.
She was raised though because she was coming with experience.
And her step was raised, but her grade 5, she was at grade 5. However, she also was she was hired to do payroll and accounts payable, which I'm sure jumped that up a little bit.
Without pointing it, it's a guess.
Yeah.
You know, with some of the, you know, access to the criminal justice networks and stuff like that, that may push it up a little bit just because of that, and the confidentiality associated with it, but I couldn't give you a specific answer on where it would be.
But Ann has also told me from Baker Tilly that a lot of what pushes up the pointing on a job description is how much financial responsibility you have. And that payroll position and the accounts payable would have.
Right. Where neither of these positions would be dealing with, well, I suppose she's dealing with water bills and you're dealing with money.
Yeah, she'd be dealing with some money.
Now, where the police secretary would not, correct?
Correct, but there is a lot of confidential information there.
Yeah, the only money that the police secretary will deal with is, you know, taking in fine payments and stuff like that when they come in and putting them in the till, but I mean, that's more cashier style financing versus really dealing with money.
And so would the clerical position
Yeah.
for cashiering. But all of this is a guess without Ann looking at the job descriptions.
Be nice to get full staff again. That would help a lot.
Does anybody have a clue, all the talk in Washington of state and local money? When they talk local, are we local or more local than most?
Who knows?
But I mean, there could be a little gift coming if, I don't know. You hear that there's quite a chunk of state and local money in that. New gift.
I just hope they don't cut LGA.
Doesn't sound like they're going to.
No, doesn't sound like it.
I would hope that they learned that lesson.
Really? I went through that one.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, the bottom line, we don't want to get ourselves in a situation where we have to lay people off like we did in '08.
No, been there, done that.
That was no fun, and there's, we don't want to do that if we don't have to. So we don't want to overload that you don't want to break the swing.
And, you know, just another thought process, and this doesn't even include the last year, but prior to COVID, motor vehicle in the time frame that I've been here from '05 to what would that have been, the beginning of 2020, had doubled in all three departments, its revenues. And that was prior to COVID, and I know you all are aware of what the girls are going through with COVID.
Would it make sense on the clerical assistant portion to give those social media duties to that person and put Kristen full-time in motor vehicle?
I really don't know how much time it would take dedicated to social media to do that job. I don't know.
That would also take Kristen away from all of our IT stuff in here too.
Or
So,
maybe a split of some of those jobs. I mean, maybe the clerical person could do the Facebook or the, I don't know. Certainly a thought.
I'm good with the police secretary. I worry about the budget. But I share in the concerns that it's gonna be hard to get somebody at part or even 3/4 time. All right,
What's the limit for 3/4 time again? What's that, like the hourly? 30?
30, 32, 30.
okay. Any other thoughts on those? Otherwise, policy's got a meeting tomorrow night. We'll finish that conversation. Okay, moving on to the Lewis Industries tax abatement and TIF discussion.
Okay. Jump on that one?
Yeah, please.
All right. Bill Spooner and I met with Lance today to give him an update on the call that we had. Belinda, Ron, Bill, and I had a call with, I keep forgetting her name, Jessica Green, Northland Securities, okay. And she kind of walked us through the TIF and tax abatement and what we can and can't do. The issue with the property that Lewis Industries is on is, number one, it's in 2 different names, which it requires a name change. Well, 3 problems. Number 2 is they need to resolve that track, the old railroad track, which they are working on right now, and they're hoping to resolve pretty soon. There are 5 other companies involved. They're all working on it. Number 3 is they already have a TIF,
They have a
and you
TIF.
can't do an abatement or even another TIF on the same property or adjacent property, especially since they want to connect 2 sides of it, 2 buildings together. One building is on the non-TIF side, one building is on the TIF side. So to connect it, it creates a headache. The quick summary of it is, and you guys correct me if I miss something here, is the solution would be to wait till the TIF runs out, and the TIF is going to run out around 2024, because otherwise the option will be is for them to drop the TIF and forego that money, which for them will be a big chunk. So don't forego the TIF, let it run its course, but have a discussion with the city now and agree that once the TIF runs out,
They would get
the city
more.
will agree to an abatement with them on the new development. And in talking to him today, Ron, he said that the future expansion, that's just like a rough idea. They don't have any plans for future expansion. He just said, based on our how we've been growing over the past 10, 20 years, we're forecasting that we'll need to be doing more expansion every 5 to 7 years roughly, but there are no plans for it. So he was interested in looking at going the abatement route, letting the current TIF run out, but they have a lot of work to do on getting their stuff in order first.
The discussion about doing an abatement in 2025 or a new TIF?
Abatement.
And why that instead of a new TIF district?
I think that would be, I don't know if you can do a TIF on a
You
previous TIF.
can't do a TIF if you've already started.
If you already,
construction on the project.
Because they want to start construction now, and they won't be ready for a couple of years. So in 3 years, when the current one runs out, they want to do abatement on the construction they're going to do now.
My biggest concern is that in 2 years, 3 of us are up for election and this council could look very different at that time.
But if we have a legal agreement, we can do that, where we have to honor it
I just don't know how we could make such an agreement.
for the future. Yeah, you can't really.
Abatement can't happen until the TIF runs out, but
No,
Yeah.
he can close out one TIF though and start and do a new one, couldn't he? But that would cost him.
it's, yeah, it's not worth the headache to go through that.
Okay,
And it would be a pretty big loss.
okay.
So that's why he's hoping for some kind of agreement now that they're gonna go ahead with their expansion, they're gonna fix the zoning they have now, they're gonna put everything, all the properties under one name. And they need to proceed ASAP with their expansion plans. That's how, fast they're growing, or they need that extra space.
Yep. Well, we can do an agreement. It's just that it doesn't lock him in. That's a risk he's got to be taking. I mean, it's no risk to us.
Yeah. And we can decide what percentage we want to abate. We don't have to abate 100%, we can say 50, we can do a declining scale. And the maximum we can do, I think, is 15 years. If there's a 15-year and a 20-year maximum. 20 is if we are doing it alone, I think. And 15 is if we have, I think, the county with us. Yeah, correct me on those. I know there's a 15 and a 20-year maximum.
Yeah.
15 years. The general rule is that a political subdivision may grant an abatement for 15 years or less. The
Okay.
maximum abatement may increase to 20 years if one of the other political subdivisions is requested to participate and declines.
Yes, so if we're the only one in it, we can go up to 20 years, but of course, that's a long time. Or 15 years is the maximum. And we decide how much we want to abate and at what percentages, declining scale, et cetera. We all agree on that.
Did we ever do that other abatement that came to us a few years ago?
No, as far as I
It
know.
never went through?
The person
It
applied.
went through, but Yarman didn't follow up on his.
Right. That's what I was going to say, it was Yarman, but
He didn't.
that's how we first learned about abatements and what it all was.
At the end of the day, I don't think he figured it was worth it. If he found other funding or whatever.
All right.
Well, he'll probably want school and county also, won't he?
Yeah, he needs to speak with them separately.
Right,
Yeah, tax abatement, each.
right.
Each entity.
Versus the TIF is all.
I would assume he'd want all three.
Yeah.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that as we go forward. Anything else anybody wants to talk about tonight that might not be on here? Otherwise, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.